Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Howdy, everybody, and welcome to the Wasatch Report. I'm Suzanne Sherman, and you've tuned into the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. This is pandemonium here in the studio. We've got everybody joining us. We have Greg Junkbond Carpenter, Daniel Bailey from the Bailey Report, one of the founders of the network, is also here, as is my regular co-host and producer, Jeff Johnson. Today, we're going to kind of play Let's Clear Off Suzanne's Desktop. I have so many windows open from so many stories I want to cover. And fortunately, we're going to be doing some shows the rest of the week, I believe. And so we'll be able to muddle through all of those. We've got a few topics that I want to take advantage of, particularly since Junkbond is here today. Junkbond, thank you for my National Security Agency coffee mug. I'm sipping from it right now, and I'm wondering where the apparatus is to let them know what brand of coffee I'm having right now. And I'll tell you, right now I'm having Pete's, and I think they put some methamphetamine in this stuff. I can't believe this. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, and I wouldn't doubt it. What they're collecting is signals intelligence and measurements and analysis intelligence, or known as MASINT. So they're measuring the volume and the characterization of the sipping as you sip coffee from the mug. And of course, that's sent back through your Internet of Things to the headquarters, collected, so they can characterize anytime you sip something somewhere, whether or not you have a...
Is it sent back through the transmitters in my teeth? I just had a crown put on. I just figured they just put the whole transmitter, so now the NSA is getting all the information.
Exactly. It's kind of like the gift that keeps on giving.
It's those amalgam.
Bless you.
Easy for you to say.
It's those the silver fillings. That's an easier word for me to say. Boy, we're off to a great start. That's a mouthful. Hey, everybody, if you still are interested at this point, you can follow us on Facebook, and we do have a live chat going on YouTube. We've had some great discussions in those. And if you want to weigh in, you can send me messages on Facebook chat as well, and my personal private message box. And Jeff will be manning the YouTube chat. Greg's probably spying on us as well in
Not
there.
that you would know. No, I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't know. By the way, today is January 30th, year of our Lord 2019. I always like to get January out of the way, and then February goes through super fast, and then we're looking at springtime, which eventually comes around June or July out here in Utah. How's everybody faring in this winter vortex out there?
I think it's well, just plain out, it sucks. We had wind chills that were below zero for the last 3 days. But last week I was in the People's Democratic Republic of Nebraska, or Omaha, I'd say. It's kind of like a city-state, a Greek city-state out there. It's extremely liberal compared to the rest of the state. And the temperatures reflected the liberality of Nebraska, too. It reached about 20 below when I was out there. Thank God. Otherwise, I wouldn't have needed 6 gloves on my hand to smoke a cigar outside. Back here now, it's only like 3 below or 5 below. I mean, it's real heat wave out here.
Well, we're a balmy, I think, 10 or so right now. And
you're kicking it.
We've gone to about 25 below out here, but I've been hearing instances of it going to about 60 below in some places. And what's sad is we're going to see a lot of livestock loss, a lot of pets lost that are left outside. And, obviously people that are going to be out there on the roads. Fortunately, Daniel Bailey got the night off and didn't have to be out on the road. He's a truck driver. Good morning, Daniel. Are you around?
Yes. Apparently, Canada shut down the roads, so that's why I'm home.
Hey, take a break, hoser.
Of all places, Canada shut them down for snow.
I want to share a story I discussed yesterday, because one of the topics that we actually did put up on our announcement for the show is disingenuity in the media. And I have an example of that out here in Utah. KUTV had a shameful absolutely disgraceful coverage of a tragic situation. Remember when Benghazi happened and the Democrats were up in arms when they got caught in their lies and the Republicans were accused of politicizing a tragedy, something they do whenever there's any shooting or whatever. They're quick to march to the drum, no pun intended, considering the current events of gun control. But here we have a story: University of Utah resident doctor killed in a murder-suicide. This was in Salt Lake City. Dr. Sarah Hawley, 27-year-old family medicine resident out here at the University of Utah, died after she was killed in what police call a murder-suicide incident. Police said the suspect was Trevor Geddes, her longtime boyfriend, whom she lived with in Sugar House. That's a community out in the Salt Lake City area. Police found them dead in the house after a concerned neighbor called for help Sunday night at around 8 p.m. In a statement, the University of Utah said the resident doctor was focusing on family and preventive medicine. Sergeant Brandon Shearer with SLPD said a neighbor who lived in the basement of the same house, who lives in a basement, of the deceased couple.
Wait. I lived in a basement for a long time in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
That's how I got used to working for the government.
Years.
That's how you got used to working for the government, because I work in places with no windows, so no ventilation, no windows. That's why I am the way I am. So don't get on that basement thing too hard and heavy there, boss lady.
Note to self: never trigger the hacker. So he heard a commotion and screaming on Sunday night and called police. They heard yelling and thought it could possibly be a burglary or a home invasion robbery. Police showed up and found the couple dead. Now, here. Shearer said a weapon was involved, but would not say whether it was a gun. Isn't that always the focus of the media? They are just salivating, waiting to hear that a gun was used. Many neighbors said they did not know the couple who moved from out of state. They'd only recently moved into the rental house on Ramona Avenue. Neighbors say Emily and Daryl Samuel, who lived across the street, said they welcomed the couple to the neighborhood when they moved in, and nothing seemed out of sorts. A quick aside on that: I will say the people out here are extremely welcoming. My former husband moved to a community out in what they call Stansbury Park. It's west of Salt Lake City. Every year, he just has all these presents put on his doorstep from all his concerned neighbors, caring neighbors, leave him all these gifts. They're very, very cordial. They do that out here all the time. I don't get quite so many because my neighbors are dispersed and I'm just, quite honestly, not very friendly.
Suzanne, you live in the middle of nowhere.
But I still
take you 5 minutes to walk to your nearest neighbor.
Hold on a second, Jeff. Wait. Even if you live nowhere, you are somewhere.
Okay.
Conundrums. Okay, let me get to
your article,
and then we're going to move on. So here's the focus now. Jen Oxborough, executive director of the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition, said in Utah, 42% of homicides are causes of domestic violence. That's compared to 30% nationally. Pardon my French. She said in Utah, most often these deaths involve a man using a gun to kill his wife, girlfriend, or domestic partner. Mind you, we don't know whether or not at the time I got this article, whether a firearm was used or not. That being said, that's not going to stop these people from their march for gun control and the use of any opportunity to put forth their effort. For a woman who lives in a home with a firearm, the risk of death goes up 500%, she said. I'd like to know where they pull these statistics.
Where did that come from?
Well, I think we know. This year, Oxborough is encouraged to see Utah lawmakers reacting to the high number of domestic violence deaths. This is all, yeah.
I think that she quoted that wrong. I think it's 500% increase in death to people that home invade, maybe.
Yes, thank you. Quite honestly, I wouldn't want to live in a home without a firearm. This is insane. The bill is intended, here's a bill that they're talking about, to do something. We always have to do something, don't we, about the state's high rate of suicides. What does that have to do? Okay. 85% involve firearms. He said it would help victims of domestic violence who too could be harmed by a suicidal partner. 13 states have passed laws already, according to Handy. The below is a full statement. We don't care about that here. What we have is an argument or an opportunity for these people to jump on the gun control bandwagon when there isn't even we don't even know if a firearm was used in this. Another reason why I won't get a concealed carry permit in Utah, the Democrats now, because the fund that they use to collect the fees that go into this fund from the concealed carry application fees, the Democrats want to get hold of that because there's a surplus, because guess what? They have had their hands off it. They want to use it to prevent suicide and domestic violence. And once again, it falls upon the backs of lawful gun owners and carriers to pay for the ills of society. That's about all I had to say on that one. You guys want to weigh in? One window closed. Boom.
I'm not
surprised that Greg doesn't have something to say about that.
Well, I was giving you the opportunity, considering
no.
has laws that are that allow people to conceal carry and things like that. So Virginia's starting to lose. That window starting to close now.
I think we're seeing that everywhere. I mean, you mentioned Nebraska, and in fact, in Utah, Ben McClintock from Defending Utah actually posted something yesterday about having a sort of electoral college in the state of Utah, because unfortunately LGBTQ LMNOP San Francisco of the Wasatch Front is really determining the policy for the rest of the citizens in Utah. And we're seeing that really in every state. What we see in Washington, D.C., determining everything across this continental landmass, so we see in every state. And we've been discussing that off the air amongst ourselves as well, where all it takes is a state capital, a state university, all the progressives congregate there like a fly on a pile of you-know-what and come up with legislation that affects those of us that just want to be left the hell alone. So what they're proposing is having some sort of like a county by county distribution of votes that will really have a result of election results that are equitable in nature rather than being form of mob rule, aka democracy. But we know that the progressives will fight this tooth and nail because this is something that will not benefit them. In fact, it will be to their detriment. You know, we see all these gerrymandering legislation. We had this out here in Utah where they wanted to redefine the borders of the districts for more fair results. Translation, more Democrat victories. So we have some tragic news, and this affects all of us. The government shutdown is over for at least 3 weeks now.
That killed me.
Yeah.
It was so nice out here in the People's Democratic Republic of Northern Virginia. I could drive down the road and smile and see the people out there with the, buddy, can you spare a dime signs. But I could drive and I didn't have to stop every 15 seconds.
Everybody's saying the traffic out in your area is a lot better. There's an article from Feed.
And the air quality is better too. Let me tell you that.
Oh, I bet. I'm sorry. The Foundation for Economic Education has an article out. We'll post it. The shutdown reveals yet another reason to abolish the TSA. The TSA, a federal agency, is facing a no-show problem with the employees as paychecks are being put on hold. My son went through. He flew out of Salt Lake City when the shutdown first started, and they marched about 50 people right through. I missed the reports. Were there any incidents of planes falling out of the air, exploding because the TSA was shut down, or did business carry on as usual, if not more pleasant?
I believe planes flew by themselves without TSA manipulation.
The article says here the centralization of airport security, in any case, a whole affair, reminds us of just one of the many pitfalls that come with federalizing airport security and making it all part of one giant nationwide federal bureaucracy. The screeners are all federal employees. Their salaries are paid out of a federal budget, more than $7 billion in the fiscal year of 2018. More than $4 billion of the TSA 7.5 came from government appropriations, the rest coming from fees on passengers and the industry. Check out the fines as well. It's a $4,000 fine if you inadvertently have a firearm in a bag, more if it's intentional. And out here in Salt Lake City, I was talking to one of the agents, and he said they get a firearm about once a week, if not more.
Did you see? Let me just ask a question here. Let me ask a question because I'm a little bit ignorant on this subject. I didn't notice any time during the 30s when Al Capone and Dillinger and these guys flew that there was any issue with firearms on planes. Did I miss anything in the Federal Register there being reported that there was a crime committed on a plane with a gun? Or is it just recently, since there have been hijackings and Muslim extremists attacking us, that there have been these problems?
Oh, no. No hateful rhetoric on here, meaning facts. Yeah. What are we looking at? Once upon a time, remember also all these drugs. We have this drug war. Drugs were legal. You could get heroin. Cocaine was in Coca-Cola. Heroin, opioids were in cough medicines. We didn't have drugs.
It was the active ingredient in Coke.
Yes. Let's also look at the national parks. National parks that were remaining open, people were out there and doing the maintenance on their own. They were cleaning up trash. In fact, government officials that were still working, we saw the video of a park ranger telling people to stop. Only in a government as dysfunctional as the one we have will a park ranger tell citizens to stop picking up trash in a national park. These people who are eco-Nazis and say they always want to protect the environment. Don't you pick that trash up, serf.
Wow, that's incredible. Can I go back to the TSA thing for just a second?
Yeah.
If I may, Madame. You said it was $7 billion to fund the TSA. Well, just thinking outside the box here, or why don't we just take that $7 billion, just lay off the people, let them get back into the productive part of the work sector here, and just let the president build his wall that way? I think he wants $5.5 billion, right, for a wall.
Yeah, I believe so. And this.
Yeah. How about we do without either?
His speech that he was going to say he's going to declare a national emergency. I think he said he was going to spend $7 billion. So there you go. There's your $7 billion.
I think he should just, first of all, not build the wall, right? Shut down the TSA. But Greg, the answer to the national,
it's an invasion.
Oh, right. But the answer to the national security issue is to shut down all the benefit programs and get rid of the social welfare safety net. Now that will get rid of people coming in here. I think that's the answer.
Well, and I think Dr. Ron Paul says that as well. Until we stop offering out this magnet that brings people here, it's not. Yeah, they want a better life. A better life is let's get out of the hellhole you're coming from and come and have free education, free healthcare, free food. The SNAP program. You have all these entitlements that needs to stop. And not only for illegals, but legals and American citizens. Stop this government welfare. If we stop,
I can't afford it anymore, to be honest.
Right. If we
can't afford to give away everything.
Stop disrupting the communities down there with our intervening. We know, and you would know about this, Greg, also about how we've intervened to put in federal judges that are Marxists all through Latin America. I was listening to a really fascinating show about that one day and how our behavior has disrupted so many of these areas. And then, of course, they want to leave. So our war on drugs, all our behavior, if we put this wall up, we're going to be placated. The GOP conservatives will call this a victory and nothing will be solved. The same problems will continue. Ultimately, we're going to be on the same side of the walls as these lunatic psychopaths in Washington, D.C., while they're also working to disarm us.
Can we get back to
the solution? Yeah, go ahead.
Can we get back to the TSA just a second? Because we're running away. We're going off on all over the place. This whole $7 billion is an interesting thing, because what we have done is we have footed the bill that the airlines should be footing. So we have subsidized the airlines to the tune of $7 billion because we've taken them off the hook of providing for the security. Now the taxpayers, which I hate, the citizens, have their money stolen from them so that the corporations can make all that money in profits because they don't have to spend it now.
But hold on, that's only part of it. The airlines have been subsidized tremendously since the early 70s, late 60s, in order to, quote, keep them afloat, which has caused the consolidation and the destruction of several private companies like Northwest Airlines, Trans World Airlines. These things all fell apart because of our federal government subsidies to each individual and different airlines. So your ticket is, when you get a deep, what do they call it, deep cut economy ticket or something that's discounted 14 times, that's our government subsidizing the rest of the cost, not the value, the cost for them to fill in for that ticket, which drives the rest of their costs up. It's an economic nightmare what we've done to the airlines. It's really a mess, and it's forced the hand of the rest of the airlines throughout the world to try to follow suit, which made other governments subsidize their airlines in a similar manner. We're causing that economic hardship on the airlines themselves because on the front end, the government's subsidizing it, and on the back end, all these fees that you see, that goes to a 9/11 security fee and this fee and that fee and everything else, plus a portion of what you pay goes back to fund the requirements, the federal requirements that they have to meet for safety and for all these other requirements and regulations on the back end. So the airlines themselves really only get a very small amount of money out of the cost of the ticket. Now, again, the value of the ticket's different, but the cost of the ticket itself, the airlines make less in most cases than the federal government collects on your airline ticket.
But Suzanne, capitalism sucks.
Right. I don't think we even have a capitalist society anymore. I mean, I don't think we've ever had the free markets really get a chance on this. While also Greg is here, I want to remind people that he has some shows on here, The Spy Who Loves Liberty, as well as Liberty Minutes. And in one of those Liberty Minutes segments, you talk about the Pledge of Allegiance. I want to share a story, Jeff. I think you have the video or the audio that you can line up so we can play this. A woman in Santa Barbara School District. Apparently there was a motion to remove the Pledge of Allegiance from the beginning of their meetings. And the headlines on these stories say that was a wife of a United States veteran says the Pledge of Allegiance and gets booed. Well, let's talk about that for a few moments. Then we're going to get on to some other things involving cybersecurity since we have Junk Bond with us today. But why don't you play that soundbite for us, Jeff, if you may?
I'm holding up a flag. I would ask anyone who would like to stand with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's all right. Point up order. Come on. It's ridiculous. What a show.
So I think that's all we need to hear, Jeff. We have the wife of a United States veteran standing up and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. We are confused. And again, I've talked about this before in my article from the 10th Amendment Center, Church of National Government. I believe we even read that aloud and have an audio version. Go to our SoundCloud page and please, while you're there, follow us. We have so many listeners. If we can get people to actually convert that into following, you will get notifications when we upload these. We have new files going up all the time. We record these audio versions of these articles, but we distinguish nationalism from patriotism. My question for you, Greg, you did a Liberty Minute segment on the pledge. We've talked about this before. Is this a patriotic thing to do? What I say all the time, conservatives love the flag for the wrong reason, or the pledge. Progressives hate it for the wrong reason. Why don't you run with that? Is
His
Greg?
mic is muted. He must be away.
Oh, okay. Well, I like to refer people to.
My mic was muted and I was talking to myself. I want you to know
I bet
that.
it was. I bet it was your most brilliant work too, and we all missed it. Can you repeat it, maybe?
Yeah, no, I was telling the dog to get off of my lap. We have a black lab here. She's a cute little thing, but she weighs about 80 pounds. So I was having a little
Say hi to
difficulty
our
trying to talk.
Joe,
Bye,
my
Luna.
our trucker friend Joe, who is listening, and it's a balmy 18 out where he is. So anyway, all right, Greg, talk about the pledge. Is this a patriotic thing to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation, indivisible, and how does that conform with our founding principles?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because the lady standing up to try to say the pledge herself really is not being patriotic. She's being a nationalist. And the people that are yelling her down, although extremely rude and not the type of behavior you'd like to be associated with, if they're going to protest against in a peaceful, quiet manner, that would be more patriotic. So in this case, the wacko Santa Barbarians. Would it be? Yeah, right. Santa Barbarians.
I love it.
They would be a little bit more right than the poor lady who just got her head handed to her on a platter. Basically, the pledge was created, by a guy named Samuel Bellamy in the afternoon in about 2.5, 3 hours of a hotel room up in Boston. And he came up with his concept of the pledge based on being a national socialist and loving Lincolnian politics. Believed that what Lincoln did by consolidating and uniting all the states into an empire was reflected in this new pledge. Now, there were a lot of people that were immigrants who were coming into the country at the time who they felt unsecure with. So, for example, the Italians coming in, any number of black people. Samuel Bellamy was a huge racist against not just black people, but anybody who wasn't, quote, like him, in his own words. He was very uncomfortable with having people come in and what they called them not being able to think on their own, and these were the Catholics from Poland and Italy and Eastern Europe. They thought that the concept of Protestantism allowed people to think independently. So therefore, in this case, again, he was very prejudiced against Catholics in this way. So there was a very small group of people that Francis Bellamy and his friends at the newspaper, the Patriot's Companion, the Youth's Companion, excuse me, were comfortable with. And the Youth's Companion was funded by a flag company. So using the premise of nationalism, the flags were handed out and given out to schools. Kids could write in for a penny and get a voucher where they raised a certain amount of money to put a flag up at their school. And they were so successful in getting kids to put the flags out, they took it to the next level, which was the centennial celebration of Columbus coming to America, which had not really been ever celebrated before, or the 400th year anniversary that had never been celebrated before in any such way, that the president decided that, well, they're going to do something, really cool. So they went out and they got support from former President Grover Cleveland, and they were able to get a portion of the program where the president spoke assigned to them for a dedication, and it was supposed to be I guess it would be support to what Columbus had done in helping America to define who she was as a country above and beyond, a gift from God, a blessing from God, and the greatest country ever in the history of great countries. So much like the Italian consolidation that happened in the 1850s, 1860s, where all the independent democracies and kingdoms came together to form Italy, much like German consolidation that happened in the 1850s, 1860s or so. And the Germans were the greatest and the Italians were the greatest in their own eyes. This was Samuel Bellamy's dream, was to call America the greatest also. And much like them, the consolidation of the independent states, although Lincoln did it through war, the others did it through peaceful negotiations. We all ended up as one great country state, I would call it now. But that was the mission of the Pledge of Allegiance, was to align, consolidate everyone together, to make everyone of one religion, one mindset. And after the pledge was put in place, it's changed 5 times. And it was also used to prosecute people many times. Several people were killed because they wouldn't say the pledge. They were beaten to death in the streets. It became a very contentious point throughout history.
Let me interject something. In fact, I forgot, what's his name? Melopolis. What's his name? That gay guy that's supposed to be conservative. I don't pay much attention to him, but Yanni something, is that his name? Monopolis, whatever. Anyway, now that I sound like a total idiot, what I do remember is he had posted a video, and what you just said reminded me of it, of a student that was in a high school who was sitting down for the Pledge of Allegiance, and because he did not stand, another student kicked the chair out from under him, sent him collapsing on the floor. And conservatives, the very ones that say we're the land of the free because of the brave, are cheering this behavior on. So if you don't say your little statement of faith here to the American flag, you're going to be beaten up, and they support that. Our good friend James Rutledge Rush wrote an article for the Abbeville Institute about the Pledge of Allegiance, and his opening statement says that George Washington would not have put his hand on his heart if he heard the words of this pledge. He would have drawn his sword. What I tell people, especially when they're arguing about the constitutionality of say, Trump declaring a national emergency and putting up the wall, I say, look, we have, which Constitution to which are you referring? We have the Constitution that was ratified, the one that was consented to by the states when they created this federal system. And then we have the Lincolnian version, where we are one united state, indivisible, with liberty and justice for none. Just ask Roger Stone about that one. And we have the indoctrination. You go to Washington, D.C. I pointed out on last week on our show that nobody was really talking about the irony that the Covington Catholic school boys had with the leftist Native American who went up and got into this kid's face, committed assault, and banged the drum. Nobody was really talking about the irony that this took place on the temple, honoring the very tyrant responsible for all the dissension and discord that we have right now. And what do they say? I actually write about this in my article, again, published by the 10th Amendment Center, Church of National Government. These are the words inscribed in the Lincoln Memorial. In this temple, as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever. The term temple, an edifice erected as a place of public worship, a church, a person, especially a large or imposing one. The Lincoln Memorial checks all those boxes. I'm going to just quote again. I do this all the time, but I think it's very important to keep hammering this point home as our listener base is growing and they might not have heard it. And I want to thank everybody that is sharing our links and spreading the good word, especially our friend Sue in Florida. Thank you so, so much. But this is a quote from an essay George Orwell wrote in 1945. And this is how he distinguishes nationalism from patriotism. As we know right now, the discussion on nationalism is really focusing on the America First that Donald Trump candidate, Donald Trump, had offered forth for during his presidential campaign. And that's not the type of nationalism I'm talking about. I'm talking about nationalism versus federalism vis-a-vis the system of government that we consented to when the Constitution was ratified.
Are they talking?
Quoting George Orwell, by nationalism, I mean the habit of identifying oneself with a single nation or other unit, placing it beyond good and evil, and recognizing no other duty than that of advancing its interests. Nationalism is not to be confused with patriotism. Both words are normally used in so vague a way that any definition is liable to be challenged, but one must draw a distinction between them since two different and even opposing ideas are involved. By patriotism, I mean devotion to a particular place and a particular way of life, one which believes to be the best in the world, but has no wish to force on other people. Patriotism is of its nature defensive, both militarily and culturally. Nationalism, on the other hand, is inseparable from the desire for power. The abiding purpose of every nationalist is to secure more power and more prestige, not for himself, but for the nation or other unit which he has chosen to sink his own individuality. And that really sums it up. We have sunk our own individuality to the collective of a nation state controlled by 535 elected officials with zero accountability to us. This is not what our war for independence was fought over. Do you guys have any comments? And then after that, I want to go to some of these cybersecurity issues, Greg.
Go ahead, Jeff. I'll let you jump in first.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, hold on a second. Let me pull this back up again here because I had one of the first articles I ever read was a Cato article, "What's Conservative About the Pledge?" And I'm just going to read two sentences. What's so conservative about the pledge? Very little, as it turns out. From its inception in 1892, the pledge has been a slavish ritual of devotion to the state, wholly inappropriate for free people. That sums up my entire feeling about the pledge. It is as a Christian, you can only have allegiance to one God, and that would be capital G, God. This here is replacing the capital G God with a small g God of state. That's my take on this whole thing.
I want to change gears a little bit now because we have so much to cover. We're not going to be taking any breaks. So lest you guys think that you're going to get comfortable and get a coffee break, not happening. So Greg, because you're joining us today, I came across an article in the Atlantic, the technology section, and I wanted to make sure you were to be with us because I don't want to touch this stuff without adult supervision, me being as technologically useless as I am. FaceTime is eroding trust in technology. First of all, does anybody have any trust in technology whatsoever? If not, you need to go to some sort of indoctrination boot camp and realize that technology is no longer a friend. Why do you keep calling me with FaceTime instead of, the normal calls? My Georgia Tech colleague, Charles, asked the other week. I don't even mean to, I answered. For some reason, it just does it that way. We thought it was a nuisance that introduced confusion, ringing the phone in a different and unexpected way, but a serious FaceTime bug, Greg, you're going to expound upon whether or not this was a bug or intentional, revealed on, on social media this week that indicates that the service Apple's voice and video telephony software could have been used for more nefarious ends. I'll let you run with what we have so far, Greg.
Well, bug hunting is big business, and the complexity of applications in different pieces of technology, i.e. your phone, your computer, has turned into big business. Right now, Google, Facebook, everybody offers what's called bounty for bugs. They have bug hunts. So the possibility of this being a accident that somebody had missed something is there. It could be just oversight that they missed something. In reality, I would say that it's probably something that was left there, not necessarily by a discussion with our government, but more so probably by the people themselves that at Apple. It's been happening, and we've been finding out more that numerous applications have embedded backdoors. A good example of this, I fired up a brand new disk of Windows 95. Now, Jeff, you might remember this. This is back when you were just a little children's. Windows 95 is something that was the first big Windows release. And I found that running today's antivirus against it brought up, and the idea what I found, I'll give Jeff. Jeff, I'll get, because you're so quiet today, Jeff. How many viruses do you think I found in Windows 95?
2.
Close, very close. That was awesome. There was actually 286 that were written into the software themselves.
Apparently, we're giving credit for a value. What is it called? Place value. I'm not a math. There's a 2 there.
Oh yeah, I was just 2 places off. You're right, Suzanne.
Right, 286. They were written into the software. Now, you can tell sometimes if something is a mistake and was overlooked versus deliberately being written in to ensure that it had connectivity to somewhere that the user didn't know about. Well, there's in here 286 different ones running today's software. Now, I did this just about it was about 3.5 weeks ago. So it's a pretty accurate, pretty updated picture of what we found inside of Windows 95. Now, this was done intentionally. This doesn't count the bugs and things like that we found in there, because you'll, of course, I've had 20-something years to look at it. Okay, there's other bugs in there that weren't caught before, which is why you have lots of patches over time. The patches are issued for bugs that were not intended, or manipulation of the code that was caught by someone who wasn't necessarily supposed to find it. That's when you're going to get these patches that come out. Now, the patches don't necessarily do what you think they do. Patches for something that's a genuine mistake sometimes are held by different governments, not released, so they can continue to have access to something, or they're taken, and this is why they have bug bounties for people to report these things to them quietly, so they can give them money, and it's kind of hush money, so they can get access through a different means that wasn't pre-programmed up front. Or in the case of the pre-programmed one, shuts down the visible manipulation of the data and puts it into a more covert means, which really means that they're not shutting off or closing it in most cases. Sometimes they do, but for the most part, they don't shut it off and close it down. They just work a different way with the patch to make it unseen that they continue with their access. So does FaceTime really erode your confidence in IT? Not for me, because I guess I'm a little bit jaded and a little bit aware of how badly the IT industry is in bed with different governments. And this transcends again across the globe. Every company is in bed with every government to an extent. If you're sitting out there and you think that for example, the NSA is just spying on Americans, I think you really need to take the perspective of every government is spying on every person to an extent. So every communication you have on your phone, every communication you have in an email, every communication you have in the computer, your browsing history, everything that gets done is collected by some government somewhere. It's not just the, quote, NSA being bad guys. For the most part, they're doing what they think is right. The internal people working the switches and widgets and stuff like that. And the same thing with every other government around the world. So
Well, and as
nothing is safe, nothing is secure. Everything, to an extent, I would say, has been compromised.
and it all comes under the auspices of they are enhancing our experience.
Experience, right?
I'm so
They're,
enhanced.
they're increasing. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're increasing the security and enhancing your experience.
I'm
But doesn't it turn out to be that Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter becomes a visceral battleground as opposed to a friendship or what would you call it? Generating or fostering good relationships among people.
Meanwhile,
I
they
think it's just the
send you all
opposite.
these messages. Suzanne, I see you recently unfriended somebody. We want you to have a pleasant experience. Here's what happens. We won't tell them you unfollowed them or unfriended them. Meanwhile, they've got all this nefarious behavior going on in the background. And here's the thing. I'm old enough to remember when I was studying law, what is the extent of the Fourth Amendment? What are our protections? How secure are we in our persons, homes, papers, effects, and so on? And we studied a case called Katz versus the United States. And at issue there, the petitioner Katz was convicted of transmitting wagering information over telephone lines in violation of federal law. Again, what is the constitutional authority for that federal law? It is non-existent, but we're not going to let that get in our way. The petitioner used a public telephone booth to transmit wagering information from LA to Boston and Miami. Now, here's what we talked about. The crux of the issue as to whether or not this was a violation of the Fourth Amendment was, is there a reasonable expectation of privacy when you go to use a telephone booth? That is irrelevant at this point now because we carry along our own wiretapping, eavesdropping capabilities for the government with us. I've got one in front of me right now. In fact, I'm holding it in my hand.
Our government, it's our government enhanced spying device.
And so the reasonable expectation of privacy has now been completely obliterated because of what we call the third party doctrine. And this was something I was ranting and raving about when Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings, the dog and pony Me Too circus, took that over completely. And because of all the lies, by the way, have any of these liars that testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee been arrested like Roger Stone has been? I'm thinking no. They're getting, I think, $1 million. Who was that professor that lied again? $1 million in a GoFundMe account. Everybody's supporting her. Meanwhile, we're arresting the likes of Roger Stone. Again, I'm no fan of his, but look at the disparity of treatment here.
Ridiculous.
So, that being said, the so-called conservatives were so, as you talk about binary opposition, Greg, and this is what it was. We can only have one or two options. The leftists are upset. They have the Me Too movement, and the so-called conservatives are taking so much delight in their misery and what asses they were making out of themselves over this whole debacle. They completely ignored Kavanaugh's stance on the Fourth Amendment and our privacy issues. He is one of those third-party doctrines. Well, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy if you're using an electronic device. Well, fair enough, but please tell me, absent smoke signals, we are going to communicate absent electronically. Yes, face-to-face, that's great, but guess what? As we talked about, Greg, these mics are always on. They can listen anytime they want. So we could do smoke signals. We can send letters, perhaps. But then that can be intercepted in the mail. I think right now, written letters or written notes, but nobody uses those anymore. So how do we have this expectation of privacy? The answer is we don't. Now we have law wanting to, this is another article from FEE, Foundation for Economic Education. Congress wants to regulate data collection, but is it worth the cost? How are they going to do that?
That's going to be extremely difficult. That's going to be major invasiveness into your internet activities, your phone activities. If there's going to be any regulation of data, it's as bad as the phone companies back in the day, where you only made local calls and you were charged for long distance calls. You can be charged for excessive data now, and it's not going to be by the companies, and it'll be through the company, so the government maximizes the amount of money they get. But in order to do that, you're going to have regulatory devices and regulatory programs linked in through the internet service providers or attached to every single email account and messaging account that you have. That's going to be exceedingly invasive. You don't. I think the whole idea of having a Fourth Amendment in the first place probably is a good idea and should be waved around in people's faces now, because just collecting the volume of data that you're using on a single day is very intrusive. And some people may say, well, it's just, how much data. So I can understand we're going forward. We have limited amounts of bandwidth in order to transmit and move data back and forth. That's really not true, folks. I want you to know that. When your internet service provider, be it Verizon, AT&T, Cox, whoever it is, comes out to your house, do you realize the size of the pipe that they're plugging into your house and the little trickle that they allow you to have? When you're paying extra money for higher bandwidth or more speed, they're really just opening up the faucet just a little bit more. Your house has been able to have, back in the day when they said, well, you could have 50 over 25 speed. Your house was over piped for $1 million, but they wouldn't let you have it. So there's plenty of bandwidth out there. If you saw the fiber optic pipes and relays that went back and forth across the states and went underseas to every country in the world, do yourself a favor. Go pull up a picture of the undersea cable system and realize that these cables, to quote one of my friends when we first came across it, when we were doing some national security work, he said, they're freaking huge. That would be the word that I would choose for these things. The amount of data that they can pump back and forth at any one time are terabytes a second. Now think about that. You don't even work in the world of terabytes. You work in the world of megabytes or possibly gigabytes that are going to be stored on your computer. You'll see a terabyte maybe on a hard drive. That's it.
I think what people have to shift their thinking is that we are the customers of Facebook, Google, any of these apps, anything on technology, Amazon, whatever. We're not their customers. We're their products.
We're the product. Yeah, we're the product. That's absolutely right. And therein lies the problem. The model has been shifted back to us. A good extent. I mean, you said it right. Amazon. We're the product. We're not the customer. And Facebook for sure. We have really, what do you get out of Facebook, folks? Tell me. What do you get out of it? You get the internal kick inside of you that makes you feel good because you're able to shout somebody down, or you were able to get your point out, or you got so many likes on your picture. You really need that?
Well, I suggest
you're a big sucker. Sorry.
We've talked about that show, The Creepy Line, before as well. And if you have not seen that movie, I suggest you see it. And this is where the tech gurus, I think it was at Google, were talking, or Facebook, we're saying, look, there's a creepy line and we're going to get right up to it, but we're not going to cross it. I submit to you, they have. I mean, I am a forced subscriber of Rocky Mountain Power Company. And every month I get a little statement where they compare me and my electrical use to that of my neighbors. And I get a great or a good job, or there's room for improvement, depending on how I do compared to my neighbors. Everywhere we turn, we seem to experience this substitution for the individual to the collective. Why do they want to compare me to my neighbors? Who cares? Who cares? Speaking of, let's wrap that up, and then I'm going to share with you a little bit of my renewal of my bar exam. Not my bar exam, my California bar membership. You probably saw these pictures. And anything else you want to say about that? Like I said, people have to remember We are the products. We are bought and sold and traded. We are tax chattel for the government. They don't refer us to citizens or constituents. They call us taxpayers for very good reason. When your kid is born and they're issued that social security number, ask yourself, would I take exception? Would I feel any different if somebody came in and stuck a tag in my kid's ear like they do cattle? I think if they did it that way and they weren't so they didn't keep it so hidden from us, there'd be rioting in the streets like they say that they want over issues like the wall. What would it take to get people that want to be left alone to finally rise up and say, we've had enough of this stuff? So every year at this time, I struggle when the communists over at the California Bar Association demand my money. In most states, you do not have to pay fees if your status is inactive, meaning inactive. I'm just paying them less money. I'm not subject to continuing legal education. I'm not practicing, but I'm still a member of the California Bar Association. I worked hard to get my ticket, and I really don't want to surrender it forever, even though I really don't plan on practicing anymore. But, and every year the fee goes up. So now I go to calbar.org, and before I can pay my fees, I'm asked to complete a survey. The first thing they want to know is what race I am. Who cares? Well, they want to know what race I am. Then they get into, here's another page, sexual orientation. Options: lesbian or gay, bisexual. Heterosexuals way, farther down the list because clearly there are a lot less of us apparently in California. Pansexual, asexual, or not listed. I learned something new. I'd never heard the term pansexual. And apparently that means you will have sex with anything that moves or maybe doesn't even move.
Dear Lord.
Yeah. And so I answered amosexual.
I don't like the way you're being outraged by this, Jeff. That's very inconsiderate.
Yeah, hater. Okay, what is your gender? Choose all that apply. Guess what? There's more than 2. Male, female, transgender. Here's something else. Gender variant, non-conforming, non-binary, two-spirited, not listed. What the hell does this mean? Am I so old? I mean, is this supposed to make sense to me? What's non-binary? Gender variant.
So non-binary. So I can help you with this because some of the graduate work I'm doing is based on transgenderism right now. So you give me a term, and I'll make you. I'll give you I'll give you an answer to what it is. Non-binary means that you don't ascribe to either being a man or a woman.
Okay.
And you're either not, or you're what we would consider intellectually a hermaphrodite, not necessarily physically, but intellectually a hermaphrodite.
How is that different from two-spirit? And what is two-spirit?
So now, two-spirit,
this is important stuff, folks. I hope you're all taking note. Okay, this is very important to the practice of law in the state of California. Okay, go ahead.
Wait, how does that? I don't know. Okay, well, and anyways, oh God,
we'll be more serious tomorrow if anybody dares come back.
Someone
I
give
don't
me
think
oxygen.
so.
I think I'm going to need it. I'm going to die of laughter here in a few seconds.
Whoa, he lives.
I do live. The truck driver was trying to find his GPS so he could keep up with the conversation, but I think I lost it somewhere.
All right. So
Two-spirit is different from gender variant, non-conforming, non-binary.
right. Two-spirit is considered, it's a kind of an umbrella term used by American Indians. That describe people in the community who fulfill what is called a third gender or gender variant role in the culture. So that's mostly someone who would be gay or lesbian, but in the sense of Indians. It's not interchangeable with LGBT, like
LMNOP.
Native American or a gay Indian. See,
I got
just someone who behaves in a manner.
We're out of time. on that note,
Well, how much? What do we got left?
we're
Seconds.
30
Yeah.
seconds.
Okay, so 30 seconds. Give me 10 seconds of this. A new post in the New York Post comes out. Scientists discover link between genes and being transgender. There's a genetic link between the malformity of people who are transgender and their genetic makeup and behavior with maladapted genes. Boom, I'm done.
Well, we'll readdress that issue. I believe we're going to go again live on Thursday and hopefully Friday this week. We've got a lot of stuff to cover. I want to thank you so much for bearing with us and sticking. We had a great time today. On behalf of Daniel Bailey, Greg Junkbon Carpenter, and Jeff Johnson, I'm Suzanne Sherman. Thanking you for joining us here today on the Wasatch Report, part of the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend freedom and tyranny from the freedom and tyranny, right? Freedom and liberty from the flames of tyranny. Thank you for bearing with us today.
God bless. All right.